are you ready to finish our solar system art from last time? I am so excited that you're here today, and I'm so excited about our solar system project. As we established last time during our video, that I love outer space. I don't know why. It's a weird, uncanny obsession that I used to have and still slightly do. Don't worry, I'm not completely weird. It's not my only weird obsession. I mean, I have other things I'm completely obsessed with, even more than outer space, like coffee and dark chocolates. So love those way more than outer space. Just wanted to clarify. Anyways, I still think outer space is this great unknown, this great beyond, this thing that we can't understand, and I just think it has a lot of gorgeous things out there, and it's kind of vast and scary, and so that's why I like it. Yeah, I don't know, I guess I like scary things sometimes. I don't know. Anyways, so if you did not do the part 1 of this, then you want to make sure to go out of this video and find part 1 of this solar system art, because you will need to draw out your planets before we do this. So if you remember last time, we drew out our planets and the sun, and we did it on a half sheet of paper using it horizontally like it was taking a bath, so that way we had a nice long strip of paper to create our solar system on. This time we will paint or color the background depending on what art supply you have. So before we get started, I just wanted to share with you a devotional from that awesome devotional book, The 100 Galactic Devotions for Kids. It's a great devotional book. I wish I could send each and every one of you a 100 Galactic devotional book, because it's so great and I would love for you to enjoy it, but I cannot. I'm so sorry. So today's devotion is from the book of Colossians in the Bible. Colossians 1:15 through 16 is the Bible verse that today's devotion is written off of. So Colossians 1:15 through 16 says, "He is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn over all creation. For everything was created by him, in heaven and on earth, the visible and the invisible, whether thrones or dominions or rulers or authorities, all things have been created through him and for him." I love that Bible verse. So today's devotional says, God created everything and is over everything. The stars in the sky, he knows exactly how many there are. The temperature of the sun, God knows the exact degree. And that is because he made the sun. God created everything you see and everything you can't see too. Here is the best part. The God of the universe wants a relationship with you. God knows everything there is to know about you, and he has plans for you. Are you ready to learn more about the God of this universe?
A Bible verse that I absolutely love that this devotional made me think of is, "For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, to give you a future and a hope." And we find that in Jeremiah 29. So if you are struggling with feeling like you're a part of God's family, know that he has plans for you and know that he does desire the best for you.
Anyways, so there's a question here. Ask your kid. What's a question you have about Earth that you know God could answer for you? And I love questions like that. When I was younger, I used to ask my dad questions about outer space, and since he's not a scientist or an astronaut, he sometimes could not answer them. And I would always say, well, when I get to heaven, I'm going to ask God that. So maybe this is one of those questions, one of those that nobody around you knows the answer. You can't find the answer on the internet. Now, when I was younger, believe it or not, we didn't have the internet, which seems super weird to say. Like, that makes me feel super old, and yet, I don't know. There's a song out there that says, I'm too young to be old and too old to be young. I guess maybe that's the category I'm falling in these days. But anyways, there wasn't the internet, so I couldn't look it up, and so I just would say, well, when I get to heaven, maybe someday I'll ask God that. But you have the internet, so you could do a little research yourself, and if you still can't find the answer, then that could be one of those questions like, when I get to heaven someday, I'll ask God that, because there's a lot of things that we do not know. We have a super, the word that they like to use is finite brain compared to God. So if ours is finite, that means his is infinite, so ours is like, only goes on for a little bit, and his goes on and on and on and on. His brain, it just never ends. And so he would have any of the answers to any of the questions that you could not find the answer to here on earth. Okay, anyways, a question for your parents. So at the dinner table maybe, or sometime when you're just hanging out together, ask your parents, what's your favorite thing on earth that God created? That would be a fun question and conversation starter. So anyways, we're going to be painting our background to look like a galaxy. This is one of my favorite projects because it turns out looking so fun, and you can hang it on your wall and just remember the order of the planets. And if you don't have watercolor paint and you're like, what do I do? No worries, you can do this project with marker. This is the marker version. So they look very, very, very similar. And in the video I will discuss what is the difference between these two. Why do they look a little bit different? And then you can decide if you have watercolor paint or markers or whatever you have, what will work best for your project. Just use what you have and do the best you can and have fun along the way creating. Thanks for joining me today.
We are going to paint an outer space galaxy type of background. And so this type of background might look way more complicated than what it really is, but for this I'm using watercolor paint, and I am just kind of dabbing my brush with a little bit of the darker blue and the purple, and I'm going to continue dabbing, and I will even use a little bit of turquoise blue, and I'll just keep dabbing until I fill the entire paper with this. Then I let it dry, and then I'll come back and dab a little bit more, and I'll let it dry and then come back and dab a little bit more. I will add a little bit of black the last time through on the dabbing, but this type of background is super easy, and you can make the colors as dark and vibrant as you want by just letting it dry and coming back a few different times, or you can keep them lighter by not coming back in with color. The reason I let it dry and then I add more color is because watercolor paints lighten as they dry. So if you just let it dry and not add more color, it won't be as dark feeling as a nighttime sky. And after it dries, I'm going to add some white paint splatters to it to add to the star effect. Now prior to this, like during the last lesson when I was drawing the planets, I did add a few white specks with my white crayon by just doing white little dots, so you'll see that there are already a few white dots, and if I would have added a lot more, I wouldn't even really have a need for the white paint. But I wanted to show you how you could use the white paint in this way too. So if you don't have white paint, before you start with the watercolor paint, make sure to just make some little white dots throughout, and then that way you have stars. And if you do have white paint, you can water it down and splatter it onto the background, and it will look really nice like stars. One last thing that I wanted to mention is it does not matter if you get paint on your planets. I, for the most part, avoid them just because you will have to wipe the paint off, but it will not sink in. It'll just leave little beadlets of water type paint on top of the planets, and then you would want to wipe it off with your napkin, and it'll wipe off really easy. But you don't have to avoid them. If you want to paint right over that area and then just wipe them a little bit with a napkin, that works too. So I'm now going to let this dry for about 5 minutes, and then I'm going to add another layer. Another little drying time of 5 minutes, and then another layer. I want to note that I'm not adding layers to all of the areas, just the ones that I want to be very dark. You do want some lighter areas on it. And now I'm just adding in a little bit of black here and there to add to the nighttime sky feel, but I would still like to leave a lot of the color. And then lastly, I'm going to splatter it with white paint to add the starry effect. Now some of you might be wondering, what do I do if I don't have watercolor paints? No worries, if you have markers, you can still do this project almost the same way. You just quickly color markers of the colors that you want to use, like blue and purple and a little black, wherever you would like those colors in that sky. So you can color quickly. This is one time you can get away with coloring quickly. You can even color right over top of those planets because that wax from the crayon will repel them. And like I'm coloring right now right over top of the asteroid belt. The marker won't color super well over the crayon spots because obviously there's crayon there, so it'll feel kind of weird as you're coloring. It'll be really light, but it'll work out fine in the end, I absolutely promise. So you just do this kind of quickly, and then the next thing you will need is a cup of water and a brush. Okay, so I have my cup of water, and there's nothing special about just regular water and a brush, and you just paint over the markers that you use just like you would for watercolor paint. And there's nothing special that I'm doing here, but the markers, since they are washable markers, they're kind of turning into a watercolor paint look. Now, I want you to make sure that you use washable markers. This will not work if you used permanent markers. And you will see in the end, when I finish painting over this whole thing with my water, that it looks very similar to the watercolor one. Now, I will show you them side by side at the very end, and I do splatter this one with white paint, and I can say that that's the only big difference, is that for whatever reason the markers kind of bleed into the white paint and the white stars do not look near as vibrant. You could fix that by putting little white dots with crayons before you start painting or start coloring with the markers. And the other thing is, it's not quite as vibrant as the watercolor paint one, but it looks super similar. So if you have markers but you don't have paint, or your mom is like, hey, don't use paint because I don't want it all over the place, then markers are a great option, and you'll end up with a project that looks almost the exact same as if you would have used watercolor paint. I'm now going to take the white paint. This is just acrylic white paint with a little bit of water in it to make it runny, and I'm going to splatter it onto the marker background that I used the water on to turn it into watercolor. Now you want to wait until it dries to splatter it, but either way, even if you wait, it doesn't end up looking all that great. It looks much better when this is splattered onto actual watercolor paint. If your white paint splatters onto any of your planets, you can just wipe it off really easy because the crayon resists the white. If it doesn't, you can always just use colored pencils to color a bluish, blackish, little bit of maybe turquoise and purplish background, and try to make it look as much as you can like what we have done today. If you notice here, I've been cleaning up all around my board. If you decide to splatter, definitely cover your surface and cover more than just a little bit of it. Anyways, here's the two together. The top is the marker one, the bottom is the watercolor paint one. You can see the bottom one's just a little bit more vibrant than the top one, but it'll work well either way. So I hope you have fun with today's project, and thanks for creating with me.